If you went back in time to 2018 and told the world that the fairy tale couple, the Prince and the Duchess, would eventually be labeled the biggest losers of Hollywood, nobody would have believed you. They had the world at their feet. They had the sympathy, the fame, and the platform. But fast forward to right now, and Meghan Markle has locked in a title she definitely wasn't aiming for, the most roasted woman in the entertainment industry. We aren't talking about internet trolls or tabloids anymore. We are talking about the biggest names in comedy, the gatekeepers of Hollywood, and even the people who used to defend them. From late-night hosts to brutal satirists, the mood has shifted. The protection is gone. And the worst part, they kind of did it to themselves. For a long time, there was an unwritten rule that you didn't touch the runaway royals. They were victims of a harsh system. But once that seal was broken, the floodgates opened and the insults became personal, vicious, and honestly hard to watch. Today, we are going deep into the timeline of how the entertainment world turned on Meghan and Harry, exposing the grift, the hypocrisy, and the brutal moments they tried to scrub from the internet. For years, America was their safe space. They moved to California to escape the toxic British press, expecting Hollywood to welcome them with open arms. And for a minute, it worked. But you know it's over when the most respected voices in American comedy stop treating you like victims and start treating you like punchlines. The turning point wasn't a tabloid headline, it was Chris Rock. Chris Rock doesn't just tell jokes, he observes culture. And in his live Netflix special, he said what millions of people were thinking, but were too afraid to say out loud. He went straight for the jugular regarding that infamous Oprah interview. Remember the massive scandal about concerns over the baby's skin tone? It was painted as this dark, sinister moment of racism that justified their entire exit. Rock didn't buy it. He took that narrative and ripped it to shreds. He pointed out the obvious, joining a family that invented colonialism, and then acting shocked that they have baggage is like, as he put it, investing in a brewery and complaining that people are drinking. He framed the skin tone question not as racism, but as basic, even if slightly ignorant, familial curiosity. Even black people want to know how brown the baby is going to be, he shouted. It dismantled their victimhood in seconds. By framing their outrage as manufactured, he signaled to the rest of the U.S. comedy scene that the gloves were off. It wasn't about racism anymore. It was about two privileged people complaining about the institutions that made them rich. And once Chris Rock said it, the rest of the industry realized they could say it too. But if Chris Rock was the warning shot, the Golden Globes was the direct hit. There is a big difference between a comedian making a joke about you and an entire room of your peers laughing at you. That is exactly what happened when Joe Coy took the stage. Usually award show hosts play it safe. They roast the politicians, they roast the bad movies. But Joe Coy went for the couple who wasn't even in the room. He summed up their entire existence in one brutal sentence. Harry and Meghan Markle is getting paid millions for doing absolutely nothing, and that's just by Netflix. The camera panned to the CEO of Netflix, Ted Sarandos, who was laughing. That is the moment the Hollywood freeze-out rumors became reality. When the guy signing your checks is laughing at a joke about how useless you are in trouble. It confirmed the whispers that had been circulating in Los Angeles for months that the industry viewed them not as talent, but as a bad investment. Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon didn't hold back either. When Harry's memoir Spare was released, it was supposed to be a serious look at his trauma. Instead, it became late-night fodder. Kimmel mocked the book, calling it the story of Prince Harold and his frozen yogurt slinger, highlighting the absurdity of a grown man selling out his family for a paycheck while simultaneously demanding privacy. Fallon took a different angle, targeting Meghan's attempts at lifestyle content. The pretzel bag sketch was simple but devastating. It portrayed Meghan as someone so out of touch with reality that she thinks moving a pretzel from one bag to another is a revolutionary life hack. It painted her not as malicious, but as simply not very bright. And in Hollywood, being seen as dumb is often worse than being seen as mean. This brings us to the core of the problem and the reason the tide turned so violently. It's the grifter narrative. For a long time, the story was that Harry and Meghan wanted to work. They wanted to be financially independent. But as the years dragged on and the multi-million-dollar deals with Spotify and Netflix produced almost zero content, the industry started to talk. Bill Simmons, a top executive at Spotify, famously lost his patience. In a moment that wasn't in the script but ended up making headlines, he called them funting grifters. He hinted at a Zoom call he had with Harry to brainstorm podcast ideas, implying that the prince had absolutely nothing of value to offer. This wasn't a joke. This was a business assessment. Even Trevor Noah, who initially defended them against the royal family, started to see the cracks. He pointed out the sheer hustle of it all. Remember that clip of Harry pitching Meghan for voiceover work to the CEO of Disney on a red carpet? It was awkward. It was desperate. Trevor realized that this wasn't about finding freedom. It was about using the royal title to get gigs they otherwise wouldn't qualify for. It shattered the illusion of their humanitarian brand. You can't claim to be saving the world while begging for a cameo in The Lion King. And then came the jam. When Meghan launched her new lifestyle brand sending jars of jam to influencers, John Oliver and Stephen Colbert couldn't help themselves. It was just so small. From the royal palace to selling strawberry jam on Instagram, the descent was steep, and the comedians made sure everyone noticed. It reeked of a cash grab, and it alienated the very people who wanted to support them. It's one thing to be roasted by stand-up comics. It's another when the intellectuals of the comedy world dissect your psyche. Bill Maher and Nikki Glaser didn't just make fun of them, they diagnosed them. Bill Maher, who is a classic liberal and usually dislikes the monarchy, found himself siding with the Queen. Why? Because he values dignity. He pointed out the massive contradiction of Harry and Meghan's privacy tour. You cannot write a tell-all book, do a 6-part documentary, and sit down with Oprah, all while screaming that you want to be left alone. Maher called it fragility. He noted that they are creatures of their generation, obsessed with victimhood, and demanding that the world bend to their feelings. Nikki Glaser went even darker. She stripped away the romance and looked at the cold, hard facts of Meghan's career. Her take: Meghan achieved the ultimate goal of every aspiring starlet. She found the one man on earth who could make her more famous than any acting role ever could. Glaser joked that without Harry, Meghan would be competing on The Bachelor or working as a barista in Sherman Oaks. It was a harsh reality check. It suggested that this wasn't a love story but a business transaction, a merger. And like any merger, when the profits stopped coming in the shareholders, the public started to revolt. But if you think the Americans were harsh, they were nothing compared to what was happening across the pond. The British comedians didn't just roast Harry and Meghan, they evicted them from the culture. There is a deep sense of betrayal in the UK, and you can hear it in the voices of people like Jimmy Carr and Simon Brodkin. Jimmy Carr went straight for the most uncomfortable truth of all Harry's past. While Harry and Meghan were lecturing the world on equality and correctness, Carr reminded everyone that Harry is the guy who once dressed up in a uniform scandal costume for a party. The hypocrisy of a man with that history trying to lecture the world on morality was too rich to ignore. Carr called Harry the Kanye of the royal family, erratic, problematic, and totally lacking self-awareness. Kelly Osbourne was even more blunt. She channeled the anger of the average person. "I'm the only one that's ever had mental problems," she mocked, imitating Harry. Her point was simple. Everybody's life is hard. Being a prince in a mansion crying about how difficult your life is doesn't make you relatable. It makes you unbearable. The British public felt used. They paid for the wedding, they paid for the renovations, and they paid for the security. Then the couple left trashed the country on international TV and still expected the perks. Simon Brodkin watched their Netflix documentary and spoke for the entire nation when he said, "I actually started rooting for Prince Andrew." Think about that. The content was so self-indulgent, so whiny, and so disconnected from reality that it made people sympathize with the most controversial figures in the family just by comparison. But all of these interviews and stand-up bits pale in comparison to the nuclear bomb that was South Park. If you study pop culture, you know that South Park marks the moment a celebrity officially loses the narrative. When the episode The Worldwide Privacy Tour aired, it was a cultural reset. It didn't just make fun of them, it exposed their entire business model. The episode depicted a prince of Canada and his wife traveling the world banging drums, launching fireworks, and holding signs that said, "We want privacy." It was the perfect visual metaphor for their behavior. It highlighted the absurdity of demanding anonymity while simultaneously doing everything possible to remain in the spotlight. The episode damaged them more than any tabloid article ever could because it made them look ridiculous. It stripped away the victim veneer and showed them as attention seekers. Rumors swirled that Meghan was upset and overwhelmed by the episode, and there were even whispers of legal action. But you can't sue a cartoon for telling the truth. And then there's the footage they allegedly tried to bury. Spitting Image, the brutal British puppet show, went even further than South Park. There are clips that are incredibly hard to find now, clips where the Meghan puppet is portrayed as condescending, fake humble, and controlling. One sketch shows her putting flowers on a bag of chips and calling it soul food, mocking her lifestyle brand's tendency to repackage basic things as luxury. Another clip shows the puppet controlling Harry like a child. The fact that this show was effectively cancelled and the clips are constantly scrubbed from the internet has led to massive speculation that their legal team worked overtime to kill it. But on the internet, nothing is ever truly deleted. If the comedians destroyed their public image, the A-listers destroyed their social standing. You see, in Hollywood, silence speaks louder than words, and the silence from their former friends is deafening. The most brutal fallout was with David and Victoria Beckham. This wasn't just a drifted friendship, it was a nuclear bridge burning. The rumor is that Meghan, in a fit of paranoia, suspected Victoria Beckham of leaking stories to the press. She reportedly pushed Harry to confront David about it. Imagine that phone call. Prince Harry accusing David Beckham, a man who is basically British royalty himself, of leaking gossip. David was reportedly absolutely furious. He hung up, and that was it. The relationship was dead. And where are the Beckhams now? David was seen waiting in line for 12 hours to pay respects to the Queen, and he's now firmly supporting Prince William. They didn't just lose friends, they created powerful enemies. Then there's George Clooney. Remember, he was at the royal wedding? He was the cool friend. But recently a story leaked that when asked how he knew Meghan and Harry at the wedding, Clooney reportedly whispered to another guest, "I don't." It turns out the Clooneys didn't really know them at all. It was an invite for clout. And now George is doing events for King Charles's charity, not Archewell. The Obamas didn't invite them to Barack's 60th birthday. The Met Gala invites never came. The Hollywood elite, who value discretion above everything else, looked at Harry and Meghan spilling family secrets for cash and collectively decided, you are a liability. But the chaos isn't just happening at parties. It's happening inside their own office. If you want to know the truth about a celebrity, don't ask their PR team, ask their former employees. And Harry and Meghan's employees seem to have one thing in common: they quit. The turnover rate at Archewell is so high, it's becoming an industry joke. We are talking about key staff, chiefs of staff, heads of communication, production leads walking out the door. Reports have resurfaced about the Duchess of Difficult nickname, with whispers of 5 a.m. emails and an impossible work environment. There is even a rumor of a Sussex Survivors Club, a group of ex-employees who bond over their trauma of working for the couple. You can spin the media, but you can't spin a revolving door of staff. And then came the Dior humiliation. This was the moment the manifesting backfired. Rumors swirled for weeks that Meghan was about to sign a massive deal with Dior. The press was hyped, and then Dior put out a statement basically saying, "We don't know what you're talking about." It was a public slap in the face. It made it look like Meghan's team was leaking rumors to try and force a deal that didn't exist. It was desperate. And in the world of high fashion, desperation is the ultimate sin. So here we are. We've gone from the royal wedding, which was watched by billions and celebrated as a new era, to 2025, where the most prominent voices in the world are calling them grifters, narcissists, and jokes. The tragedy of Harry and Meghan isn't that the media destroyed them. It's that they refused to listen. They refused to read the room. They thought they could lecture the public on how to live while flying private jets. They thought they could sell out their families and still be respected. They wanted to be the king and queen of Hollywood. But Hollywood is a brutal place. It loves a star, but it loves a comeback story even more. However, to have a comeback, you first have to admit you made a mistake. And based on everything we've seen, from the interviews to the memoirs to the failed podcast, self-reflection isn't exactly their strong suit. As John Oliver said, "I don't think they will change because I don't think they have the capacity to." And that might be the harshest roast of all. What do you think? Was the industry too harsh on them? Or did they dig this hole themselves? And do you think they can ever recover their reputation? Or is the brand officially broken? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that subscribe button, because the stories in Hollywood are only getting crazier.